People ask me, how can you support Bernie Sanders? And I reply, how can I not? My story's tragic, but there's worse ones out there, like the residents of Flint, Michigan. But that story is better carried by a fellow Michigander, Michael Moore. He speaks for those tragic residents of Flint, Michigan. Clean water, health care, basic food, basic housing are human rights. Michael can tell their story. Please welcome my fellow Michigander, climate warrior, voice for reason, peace, and justice, a dear friend of the Sanders campaign, and a director of Films of Conscience, Mr. Michael Moore.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, sharing that very powerful story with us. This is my 10th day here in the state of Iowa, campaigning for Bernie, campaigning for the rest of the country, for all of us, for our future. It's the story you just heard. I've heard this story all across the state of Iowa. It's you can't believe it. If people were watching this right now in Canada or any European country, this man who just spoke to you is a doctor. And he's still paying off his student loans. I don't know how old you are, and I don't want to out you. Huh?
65.
You're 65 years old.
Yes, sir.
I met a doctor, a woman in Des Moines yesterday, 2 days ago. She said to me, she's not even a doctor yet, she's still a resident. I've got over $300,000 in student loans I'll be paying off till I'm in at least my 50s. A doctor. Do you realize in a civilized country, pick one, Canada, pick any country where healthcare is a human right, one of the things they do is make sure that their doctors graduate with no debt. Because they want their doctor thinking about healing and not ever having a moment of stress, worrying about how they're going to pay the mortgage. Who are we? We hear this word for the last 20 years, terrorism. And I've really started to think and wanting to ask this question. What is terrorism? I mean, we know what it's traditionally defined as. We were attacked on 9/11. People are attacked and killed in other countries. We know what that kind of terrorism is. But what do you call it in a town, say, like Flint, Michigan? The town that was the birthplace of the middle class, because it was the first place that a union got a contract with an industrial corporation. The UAW was their first big contract back in the 30s. My uncle was in that sit-down strike. They took over the factories for 44 days. They would not leave. General Motors turned off the heat. This went from New Year's Eve to February 11th. They turned off the heat. They turned off the water. They wouldn't let any food be brought in until the women of Flint decided to arm themselves with baseball bats and went down to the factories and broke all the windows just so they could throw food in to their husbands and their sons and their brothers. It was the women who helped win that, and it was Franklin Delano Roosevelt who finally called up the governor of Michigan and said, you are to tell the National Guard to take their guns that are pointed at the workers and their families, turn the guns away from them, and point them to the Pinkerton agents and to the police who are beating these women who are trying to bring food to the factory workers. And once Roosevelt got in, our first Democratic Socialist president, because all those words mean, as we know, democratic means democracy. We believe in democracy, and we, Bernie, myself, you, believe it's not a true democracy if it's just about us getting to vote at election time. The economy also has to be democratic. We have to have a say in our own economy. And the pie has to be split fairly so that everybody gets a slice. Everybody has a seat at the table. That's what that is. People say, well, I don't understand. What's this democratic social? I'll tell you what it is. It's the rich man will have a harder time getting into heaven than a camel will have trying to pass through the eye of the needle. It's the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. It's if we only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, how are we going to feed the 5,000 people here for the sermon? And he just says, well, just start doing it and there'll be enough, but make sure everybody gets something. Make sure everybody gets something, not just the people who own the fish or the loaves of bread, but everybody gets a piece of the food, and everybody was fed. It really is just the tradition of the way I was raised, the way you were raised, to do unto others as you would hope they would do unto you. And we now live in such a dark and dangerous time. And we have a president who's so appalling in his treatment of other people, in even his own people. And today, watching the trial in the Senate, and the Republicans, my grandfather was the leader of the Republican Party in the town that I grew up in. But I remember him explaining that the idea of being a conservative, to conserve, meant conserve your money. Don't spend money you don't have. Conserve the earth that God gave us, these natural resources. Conservation. That's what conservative meant. Be good to each other. Be kind. Oh, if he were alive today. The fact that not only that the Republican senators still enable this person who thought about himself before his country, that there are Republican senators in there today whom he called losers when they ran against him. Loser, you're slow. One of them, who's voting to enable him today, Trump accused his father of having something to do with the Kennedy assassination. And yet there he is, right up there. But that's the way it's been since we were all in middle school. The bully, the way the bully operates, is to make everyone else afraid, to get people to come to large rallies and to stoke their fear of the other. This is our real challenge in November, to show who we are as a people. Who are we? And to stop these forms of economic terrorism that destroy rural Iowa, that destroy Flint, Michigan, it's a nonstop. The majority of Americans now, did you read this story this past year? Do not have enough money available to them, do not have enough cash on hand, that if a loved one tonight across the country passed away, they don't have the money to fly and go to the funeral. $500. Majority of Americans don't have $500 to their name. And none of that has changed under Trump. Because he has only one belief. And that belief is not in the Republican Party, not in the United States of America. His belief is in Donald J. Trump. What's good for Trump? But I want to tell you why I'm here for Bernie. We have such a unique opportunity here to elect someone who's not part of that system. Not the same old, not the candidate who's safe. That commercial that we're seeing this weekend here in Iowa, vote for me, I'm the safe candidate. Wow, that's how low the bar is now? Oh, you got to be a safe? I can't imagine. if you go on, like if you're single and you go on Match.com and you were reading the profile and the guy said, go out with me, I'm safe. You'd be like, wow, I don't think so. I'm safe. We were told to vote safe in 1984 and we lost. We were told to vote for the safe, bland candidate in 1988 and we lost. We were told to play it safe in 2000. We won, but we lost. That's what we're great at too, our side. We win the election and we aren't not given the keys to the White House. We have more people wanting us than the other side, and yet we don't get to enter the Oval Office. And now, today, I don't know if you've seen the news today. I'm so upset in the car driving here to Creston today. And by the way, thank you for having us. Thank you to Southwestern Community College for having us here. It's a beautiful campus and school here. We're happy to be here. We always look up on Wikipedia the town we're going to see, what they're famous for. You've got it out there right on the sign coming into town. The Pee Wee League Championship from 1967. I just want to ask what's happened since 1967. May I suggest maybe letting the girls play? You might. No, but this is also the hometown of Walter Cunningham, the astronaut on Apollo 7, just before, as we were on our way to going to the moon. He was from here. That's pretty cool. You also have the largest True Value hardware store I've seen anywhere in Iowa. I don't know why that is, but no, we thank you for having us here. But on the way here, the story came on radio that the Democratic National Party has decided to suspend their rules on you have to have so many donors to show you have wide support. Bernie has more donors than any candidate running this year, more donors, donating more money, and yet donating the smallest amount of money, $18 a donor. But they have that rule there because, if you didn't like 27 people on the stage, there'd be 327 on the stage, so they have to have some rules. So one of the rules they set up was to make sure that, let's make sure that there's enough people that support this individual. And one way to do that is, if they're willing to give $5 or $10, well, if there's enough of them, they removed that rule today so that they could allow Michael Bloomberg to be on the stage, to allow a billionaire who was elected the Republican mayor of New York City in 2001. They did this just for him. He doesn't have to prove that he has any support amongst people who would be willing to give him money, because of course he's just using his own money. That he could actually buy his way onto the stage. I'd like to hear full transparency from the DNC and tell us how much he has offered to give in the November election if they let him on the stage. And I'm not going to dwell on this, but I just think this is what we're so used to on our side, where people that are supposed to be on our side end up being for the people with the money. How many times have we seen when our candidate, the Democratic candidate, the number one contributor was Goldman Sachs? Enough of this, folks. This is why we lose. Even when we win, we lose. It doesn't work this way. And we have to say that this is wrong. We have no people of color left on the debate stage. They didn't change the rules so that Cory Booker could stay on the stage or Julian Castro could stay on the stage. They made no provisions for that. But for the white billionaire, we can just dispense with the rules. And this is what all of us have had to deal with our whole lives. There's one set of rules for us, and there's one set of rules for the rich. We have one candidate who will not tolerate this, who will not put up with this, who will speak out against it, and he will fight for us, all of us. It boggles the mind. But I want to focus on, we're in the final days here in Iowa. And we have somebody Oh, this is, this is one of the reasons they changed the rules. You know why they changed it. Bernie is ahead in all the polls now. He's ahead in Iowa. He's ahead in New Hampshire. He's number one in the poll today from California. In the poll from Texas yesterday, of all the Democrats running, the one that does the best against Trump in Texas is Bernie Sanders. Or the story that came out this morning that the candidate who has received the most donations from members who are active duty military, our sailors and soldiers and airmen and women, the number one candidate with the most number of donations from our military soldiers is Bernie Sanders. I read that and I went, I'm like, wow, why isn't this reported? Why don't we know this? Why isn't that I see now what has to happen? And, was it six minutes, did you say? Oh, we're done. Okay. 26 minutes, I know. No, we're just, Jane Sanders is here, so we want to bring her out. But I just want to tell you that Bernie has the highest approval rating of anybody running for office. He's the most beloved senator. They did a poll in all 50 states for all 100 senators of who is the most popular amongst their constituents, and number one was Bernie Sanders. We will win with Bernie. Bernie will beat Trump. Trump cannot beat Bernie. Trump can win in 16 because when you're running against things that aren't real, when you're running, he can stand up and say that, it's okay. It's okay. Your child is on nationwide TV here on C-SPAN. This is like so cool. You'll be able to play this tape at his 16th birthday, 25th birthday. He's going to go, oh, geez, Mom, why didn't you? Bernie is beloved, and I've seen it here in Iowa. And it's important that everybody get out and caucus this week on Monday. Bring 10 people with you. Bring 20 people with you. Don't listen to any of the other stuff. Bernie was against the war. When we've run candidates that were in favor of the Iraq war, we've lost. Bernie was right. They were wrong. We need to put people in office that can win. And Bernie can win. Bernie can win this election. I believe it in my heart. I've seen it across the country. You see it in all the polls. And I think especially with young people, depending on the poll, 52% of 18 to 35-year-olds, 56% of 18 to 35-year-olds. In Texas, 18 to 29-year-olds, 70% for Bernie, 70%. This is what's really going on. Whether it's reported or not, it doesn't matter. The truth is the truth, and the truth will come out during the primaries and caucuses. And they're for him because he is all about their future. Bernie is fighting the climate emergency that we're in. Bernie is fighting so that women are paid the same as men. Bernie is fighting so that the government keeps their hands off women's reproductive systems. Bernie is fighting because he knows you can't live on $7.25 an hour. You can't live on $10 or $12 an hour. You could barely make it on 15. That's the minimum it should be. He's fighting for all those things, and everybody in here, and especially the young people across Iowa, they know. They know because he's not fighting for his future. Bernie is in his future. He's already there. But he knows what they're going to have to live through in 10, 20, 30 years. Or just even right now, as he told you the story of the flood here in Iowa. Don't you want to live in a country where you never have to listen to a story like that again that we just heard? Where his dying wife is taking care of him in the hospital, and the co-pays and the deductibles are so insane. When people say Bernie can't win, what they're really saying is, we don't want Bernie to win. Because we don't want to make sure that everybody can see a doctor and not go broke. We want to make sure that women are treated the same as men. We want to make sure that if you want to go to college, you're not in a debtor's prison at the age 22 for the next 20 or 30 years. All of that. That's what they know Bernie is going to fight for. They know also we're going to have a Democratic Senate. We will have a Democratic Senate, and we will have a Democratic House, and we will have Bernie Sanders in the Oval Office, and that means we will all be in the Oval Office with him. So I want to bring out now the star of today's show here in Creston, Iowa. I had some time to, I did a little podcast with her earlier today, and she's an incredible woman. She's a fighter in her own right for progressive causes for decades. And she stands with Bernie in this incredibly wonderful, beautiful fight to make this a better place for all of us. Please welcome to Creston, Iowa, Dr. Jane Sanders.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here in Creston today. Thank you, Tyler and Dr. Yoni, for your remarks, and Michael for your support and your incredible, I'm the star, I'm following Michael Moore. So, but I'm really thankful for all his support, and I enjoyed the podcast. Hopefully you'll listen to the Rumble. It's actually a very, very fast paced podcast. He expected it to be just a short one for a little while, or not a slowly growing podcast as most. It's got 3 million viewers already, or listeners. Anyway, I want to thank you all for coming out, and it's an honor to be here representing my husband, Bernie Sanders. I love that Creston, having looked a little bit about your town, has a vibrant arts community. 4th of July, a walk of chalk, and I understand you have a permanent street quilt that was placed this last October. The arts and culture, Bernie and I believe, are extremely important to have a vibrant, healthy, happy community. In fact, our campaign has an arts and culture division, and you'll see lots of creative posters and T-shirts and hats and all different things done by artists that volunteer. And speaking of volunteers, it's headed up by Bernie's and my son, Dave, who's working as a volunteer, and he's here in Iowa with us, but he's knocking on doors, I think, in Ankeny right now, with his our two grandchildren, Ella and Dylan, who are 11 and 8. Anyway, as you can see, I don't give a speech like Bernie where I talk only policy. I talk a little bit more personally. So let me tell you a little bit about Bernie. I met him in 1981 when I was a community organizer and he was running for mayor of the city of Burlington, Vermont. And the neighborhood groups that I worked with organized a debate. And the first time I heard him speak, I just fell in love with his ideas. I felt that he embodied everything that I believed in, that he understood the struggles I was going through, paying off student loans and raising 3 children. It was quite amazing. And what's wonderful is, as I've gone around the country with him and we talk to audiences, I recognize that same feeling in people when they're listening to him. Lots of times people come in and they're, okay, I'm here to check it out. And then you can see kind of a changing in even their stance. They might be listening at first, and then they're like leaning a little bit forward. And then it's like they found, okay, somebody actually speaks for me. So I am so proud to be at his side in this campaign, let alone in his life. I'm a very lucky woman. So, but as I said, he embodies everything. I thought he embodied everything I believed in back then, and I still do. I can tell you, as somebody who's known him for almost 40 years, that he is as honest as the day is long and as consistent as the sun rises. I think it's important for voters to know that, because we've all gone through campaigns where we hear people say what they believe today and the issues that are important to them or that are important to their audience today. What I believe we need, especially in this campaign, is somebody that we know without a doubt will consistently follow through on what he says, that he believes what he says, he means what he says, and he carries it out. Bernie is that man. The Bernie Sanders who, as a college student, got arrested for protesting segregation at the University of Chicago and in Chicago itself, is the Bernie Sanders that will, as president, fight institutional racism, improve our very difficult criminal justice system, and enact a humane immigration policy. The Bernie Sanders who, as mayor, was frugal with taxpayers' money, yet expanded services such as a youth office, a women's office, an arts office, and a community and development office. I headed up the youth office, and it was a most rewarding job I've ever had. He is the president, Bernie Sanders, who will deliver on a Green New Deal, fight climate change, and transition our country to 100% renewable energy. The Bernie Sanders who in Congress fought the bipartisan efforts to cut Social Security. Sanders who not only stops the cuts but expands the programs so our seniors can retire in dignity. The Bernie Sanders who fought to protect family farms in Vermont will fight to deal with the issues of agribusiness and the environmental impacts on our degradation of soil and water, and the agribusiness companies that are hurting farmers and farm workers throughout this country, including in Iowa. The Bernie Sanders who had the courage and the strength and the judgment to lead the fight and vote against the Iraq War will be the President, Bernie Sanders, who ends our endless wars and refocuses rebuilding our international presence around the world and our alliances by creating a foreign policy based on peace, diplomacy, and cooperation. And the Bernie Sanders whose campaigns are funded totally by grassroots donations. I'm sure many of you are on our email list, and thank you very much for your support. He'll be the president that will end and overturn the Citizens United disastrous program. In other words, Bernie's long and consistent track record as a champion for the multiracial, multi-generational working class is unflinching. That's why I and you and millions of other supporters know that amidst the continued onslaught of corporate interests, special interests, and the corrupt political system, he'll stand firm in fighting for us. We trust him because of the moral clarity he has built, he has demonstrated over the course of a lifetime. Now, we know it's not enough to be on just the right side of the issues. And Michael Moore commented on some of this. Donald Trump is, we believe, the most dangerous president in the recent history of our country. And we need a nominee who can defeat him. The good news is Bernie is that nominee. Since 2016, virtually every poll from the last election and throughout when they started polls again this election show that Bernie can beat Donald Trump. It's part of it is just because Trump can't vilify him as inauthentic or hypocritical, and he's the polar opposite. You confront lies with truth. You confront hatred with compassion. And that is, we're going to see a real contrast if it's Bernie against Trump. And we feel very, very confident that Bernie is the candidate that can beat Trump. And that's the safe way to go. He has a record of winning election after election and expanding his base. The more people get to know Bernie, the more they like him, the more they trust him. And that is outside of the Democratic Party as well. Independents and Republicans in the state of Vermont support Bernie. We hear all the time, oh, you know, yeah, I voted for Bernie. I don't agree with him, but I trust him. And they'll say, you know, we know where his heart is. He's fighting for us, fighting for working class people. So for a while, his ideas about Medicare for all, free college tuition, renewable energy, and criminal justice reform were dismissed as radical or extreme. And that's changed. And I think that's due not only to Bernie and his consistency and his continued work, whether he's running for office or not, but it's due to the movement that has built up around these issues. That's, I think, one of the most important things that we have to do. We have to have each one of us play a role in making people understand that these ideas are not the fringe. They are the ideas that resonate with the American people because they actually address the issues facing the American people. The agenda is supported by millions of Americans who are fed up with a political and economic establishment that works quite well for those at the top but leaves so many behind with lower wages, longer working hours, and rising health care costs. The agenda is supported by millions of Americans who knows it's not radical to ensure that universal health care is available just like it is in every other industrialized nation. And his agenda is supported by the people that understand it is unconscionable to hold back the vast potential of our young people because of $1.5 trillion in student debt. And our agenda is supported by the majority of people who understand that we have no more time to waste in effectively combating climate change. That means transitioning the economy to 100% renewable energy through a Green New Deal that will also create over 20 million good paying jobs for the 21st century. During this campaign, Bernie and I have traveled around the country, talking to people and listening to their experiences, hearing about their hardships and learning about their dreams. Clearly, our country is at a crossroads with our unique diversity, our yearning for a better future, but also our sadness at a political and economic system that is failing us. We have come face to face with the inequalities, the poverty, the racism, and the injustice that continue to hold our nation back from its promise and potential. But here's the good news. We see every day in this campaign that we are all in this together and we're not on the fringe anymore. Our job now is to reject thinking small in this great country. When we have the courage to think big, when we have the courage to stand up united, to fight for the promise of our country, none of our ambitions is impossible to reach. We are America. We went to the moon 50 years ago. Let's make a moonshot for justice in this generation. The campaign's motto is not me, us, and that means our movement is bigger than Bernie. It's bigger than one campaign. It's bigger than the presidency. Our movement is about America's future. This is our moment. Transformative change will take place if we stand together, united by a common purpose, a coherent vision, and a robust policy framework. Individuals across this country, individuals such as yourselves, who are working tirelessly to build the future we want, is the foundation of this political revolution, our grassroots movement. And with Bernie Sanders fighting for the promise of working people across this country, we will get this done. Bernie has always been and always will be a fighter for you. He will never bow to any corporate elite or moneyed special interest. That's the president we need, the kind who will not only make promises, the kind that will make change, the kind who will not only raise hopes, but will fulfill them, the kind who will not only praise peace, but attain it. Of course, the political and economic establishment, as you see if you just turn on your TV, is doing everything they can to stop us. They're airing negative attack ads and trying to buy the election with super PACs. But that's a sign of our success. They know that if we all stand together and don't get demoralized, we're on the verge of an historic victory that will transform this country. So my request of you is simple. Keep door knocking, keep texting, keep calling, and keep working as hard as you can. And it's not just about you individually caucusing, that's important, but it's also about your family, your friends, your neighbors, your roommates. Don't ask them to caucus, bring them to caucus. And remember, always, throughout this campaign, I know we'll move on from Iowa, but you'll be important throughout this entire campaign. It's not over on caucus day. The work continues. We're in this together, and together we can create real and lasting change, not only for our country today, but for future generations. Let's do it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Have a seat. I'd be happy to take any questions, comments, suggestions. There's a gentleman in the back.
If Bernie's income tax plan is implemented, what happens to industry in our economy?
It'll improve. The fact is, yes.
General Motors, they owe 90% income tax?
Well, if you look back just to Reagan, you'll find out that, and we're not talking about 90%, but if you look back, we would like to roll it back to when we had Ronald Reagan, his kind of taxes. The fact is that Bernie's plan will help the vast majority of people and small businesses. We are asking large corporations to pay their fair share in taxes. When Amazon has huge profits and doesn't pay a nickel in taxes, and you pay 25% of your taxes, that's not fair.
Well, why not embrace a flat tax? Did you make $5? You owe 10%?
Well, but I mean, the person that makes that has $5 doesn't have much disposable income once they pay their housing. And so I don't think we should go into a back and forth, but I think that what you have to recognize is that we are asking a simple fairness to say that corporations that make huge profits pay their fair share, and people who work very hard pay what they can afford, as opposed to having some people have all the disposable income, they can't spend it fast enough, and others not being able to pay for their health care, for their housing, for their food, for their children's education. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Proven not to work.
What?
Trickle down is for a little dog on a tree. Trickle down theory of economy
does not make it down to the.
You're absolutely right.
Doesn't
No,
water the grass.
absolutely. Trickle down does not work. It's been proven over and over again. I couldn't agree more. Yes, ma'am.
We walked together in the parade when you were in Creston before.
Oh,
So welcome back.
thank you.
One of the complaints that I hear is that the things that Bernie wants to accomplish are so vast. Obviously, things must be taken in increments or whatever. You're not going to turn over and in a year be where we are, especially thinking I have a grandson who's over $100,000 in debt for a law degree, but he's doing fine, you know. But those things take time. So what is Bernie's plan to really obtain, say, the student loans or the health care or some of his really far-ranging items?
Good. And I think it's important to recognize that we're not an island. We, all over the world, industrialized nations have the things that Bernie is proposing. So for Medicare for All, just to give you some specifics, Medicare is a program that already exists. So you're not starting from scratch and trying to build something new. Obamacare had to do that, and President Obama deserves our respect and support for moving this agenda to the front of the dialogue of this nation. He also thought that it needed to go further as time went on. With Medicare, he will be expanding an existing program. At the very beginning, the first year, he will include eyeglasses, vision care, hearing aids, dental care, and at-home care, which will be quite considerably important. I think anybody who's had an ill parent, an older parent, at-home care really is important. So he'll do that the first year and lower the age to 55. The next year, the age gets lowered to 45. The next year, it gets lowered to 35, and everybody's included. So one of the things that people are always saying is, oh, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? Well, who's paying for it now? You are. And the estimates for the future is that this system, as it is now, will be costing us $50 million more. $50 million. Is it million? Trillion. I've got to call Yang. But a lot of money, a lot of money. But the point is, it's a lot more money than what his plan is doing. His plan is asking. Now, what people will say was, well, you're raising taxes. So, but the point is, right now, an average family making $60,000 a year, who is right in the middle of the economy, a family of four, is paying an average of $12,000 a year out of pocket for premiums, deductibles, co-pays for health insurance. Now, in his plan, it will cost $1,200 a year for that family. That is saving families money. Yes, you're going to pay more in taxes. That's the $1,200 that you're paying in taxes. But you're saving in premiums, co-pays, and deductibles. And we're having a broader expansion of our health care, recognizing that mental health care has to be at parity. Prevention has to be part of it. We're not talking about health care from an illness-only perspective, but how about a well-being perspective? How about a healthy lifestyle, a way to address illness before it starts? So that's just one example. For the other things we've talked about, minimum wage, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and everybody said, "Oh, never happened last time." Well, it's happened in many states, 40 cities. People are there. It's happening on its own because the idea was out there. Can you imagine having Bernie Sanders at the bully pulpit, talking about these ideas, explaining these ideas, getting them into the national dialogue, and having people such as yourselves, leaders in the community, making it happen in each community, one community after the other, even if it takes a little longer to make it national. And then the last example, you mentioned education, tuition-free college. I went to the University of Tennessee, which I can tell you is not a hotbed of radicalism, and they now have free college tuition. It makes sense. You know, Cornell, I mean, there are a number of places that are doing that now. In fact, when I was growing up, that was the case. That was what we all experienced. You'd spend $25 for a course, you know, or something. So I think these ideas are ideas whose time has come, and he will be able to make those things happen the same way that he made Burlington the most livable city in the United States and got acknowledged by U.S. News and World Report as one of the nation's 20 best mayors, by bringing people together to make it happen and changing the people that are in elected positions if they don't follow what the people want. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Do you recall being here? Did you come here in 2015?
We did.
Because Bernie worked the flea market, I think, and at that time he was a virtual unknown, and I remember going, that's Bernie Sanders, and I rushed to get a picture with him. I think you were here with him, and I said,
I was here for the parade, the 4th of July parade.
Okay.
Yeah.
My question is, why does the term democratic socialist seem to scare so many people? Bernie says he's a democratic socialist, but I see it on so many of my friends on Facebook. They're so scared of that. He's a socialist.
Well, I think when they leave off the democratic, they get worried. But the fact is, it's a democratic socialist. It's really what most of Europe is. I mean, we have social democrats all over Europe, and all it means is basically a government of the people, by the people, for the people. A government that is focused on the public good instead of to the exclusion, for the public good, which is often in this country, the private profit works as the guiding light to the exclusion of the public good. We have no problem with private profit. I remember I was telling somebody today that I remember when my son was 14 or so, when Bernie was mayor, they were asking about democratic socialism, and somehow they asked this 14-year-old what he thought, and he said, I just want to be one of those people with a swimming pool who pays more in taxes. So I mean, I think we need to recognize, yes, there's nothing wrong with people being well off. What we want to do is make it more possible for the everyday person, the person that might not have all the benefits of growing up in a wealthy community or in a wealthy family, to be able to become entrepreneurs, to be able to reach their full potential. And that means, you know, supporting small business, it means supporting education. And I think all we need to do, and I ask your help in doing that, is explain to people where democratic socialism really means public good, and in addition to private profit. Thank you. Yeah.
So, I've lived in Europe, I've lived in the UK, I've lived in Asia, and all of these other first world countries have what we would consider a socialist nature to them, where the government actually takes care of its citizenry, and in return the citizenry actually helps the government be more prosperous. Mm-hmm. And my question is, how do we get people to stop voting against their own self-interests? You know, we have people here in Union County that aren't billionaires, did by any tax hike to the top 1%. But they will come and argue those points like it's affecting them. How do we change that mindset?
I think one of the things that we see with demagoguery is that people say we need to divide people up and have them think that it's their neighbor, they're a person who is a different religion or a different ethnic background, or somebody who is poor, who is taking so much away from them. And I think when you have leadership that does that, it can be convincing. And I think what we're saying is we need leadership that does exactly the opposite, that recognizes that diversity is America's strength, and that we need, if we all work together and we're united in values and principles that say we want justice, we want fairness, we'll be able to move this country in that direction. I think it's conversation to conversation. It's a lot of work, but I think we need leaders throughout this country that are doing this work. That's why I'm so excited when I hear people are going to run for school board or city councilor or a state representative. It matters. It matters at every level if you are talking about we're in this together, we're a united country, not united by partisan politics or not united on hatred for anything, but united based on what our hopes and dreams are for ourselves, our families, our neighbors, for future generations. We can make exceptional progress. And I think, honestly, this election is the most important election that I've had in my lifetime. I think everyone was very important. But right now, the danger of a second term for President Trump, I think, will really hurt our vibrant democracy. And we want a campaign and a government and a nation of love, of compassion, of justice, not one of division and hatred. So I'm asking all of you to please, do whatever you can, and even if you don't vote for Bernie, just try to swim in that direction, try to offer a positive vision for our country. Thank you all very much. I'm afraid I'm going to have to go. Thanks.
Yeah.